Now, to further discuss this with us, we are joined by Dan Perry, a former editor-in-chief of Associated Press, Europe, West Asia, and Africa region in Tel Aviv. Dan Perry, welcome to NewsX World. Now, my first question to you would be that we are seeing these talks that are happening between Oman and Iran, but we are not seeing a significant part of that, and that is the U.S. involvement. The U.S. has not been involved in these talks. Now, how will this further escalate this Strait of Hormuz conflict, as both Iran and Oman are saying that they need to consult the Gulf partners and not mentioning U.S. in the talks whatsoever?
The only way this is going to go away is if Iran and Oman abandon all efforts to control the Strait of Hormuz and to charge fees or tolls for passage through them. It was rather shocking that in the initial announcement several weeks ago, after the first round of talks, or at least the last round of talks, Oman and Iran jointly seemed to suggest that they would be charging fees. This is why Trump, shortly thereafter, and rather ridiculously, threatened to bombard Oman. I don't think this will fly. I don't think the other Gulf countries are going to play along, and I don't expect it to come to pass. There's no way Oman will put itself at loggerheads with the entire planet. Now, what is interesting today is that I'm not hearing that much about fees and tolls anymore. So if this is a face-saving way out for the Iranians and by extension the Omanis to walk away from that demand, then it might actually de-escalate in a way, because the U.S. a few months ago had seemed prepared to give Iran most of what it wants in exchange for nothing other than promises on a nuclear issue and the restoration of passage through the Strait of Hormuz. As you may recall, Iran was going to get not only a free pass on massacring protesters, not only no demands that it do democratic reforms, not only no demands that it stop subsidizing funding, training, and guiding terrorist militias in Yemen and Palestine and Lebanon and Iraq and Syria, but they were going to get full sanctions relief, a complete unfreezing of assets, and a reported $300 billion windfall through business monies funneled to them. It was beyond belief. And incredibly, they refused to pocket that win and proceeded to try to push the envelope on the Strait of Hormuz and charging fees through it, which is something I don't expect the world to accept. It's a total casus belli, and I have been calling for months for the response to that, not to be a resumption of the war, which is just ugly in every conceivable way, but a complete and total lockdown, blockade, economic and maritime and air and land and sea, of Iran. And so, as I say, I've been calling for a land, air, and sea blockade and a total economic chokehold, and that appears to be what the U.S. is now easing towards, and that is probably the right war to fight, because, you know, we keep hearing that Iran continues to sell oil to China and to find ways through various trickeries to get around the sanctions and even a blockade. But what goes often unremarked is that most of the oil they're selling, indeed possibly all of it, is stocks that were stashed outside the blockade zone in a high season elsewhere before the war. So they're selling that, but that's going to run out. And at the current rate, it's going to run out in somewhere between 3 and 6 months. And remember, this is a country where there's a water crisis, a power crisis, basic goods are unavailable. The currency has collapsed by 80% in the past several years. And the people were willing to endure massacres 8 months ago in order to overthrow their oppressors. I suspect a complete and total blockade, as I'm describing, will hasten its fall, because, as I say, they're going to run out of the gas that has been stashed away outside of the Persian Gulf shortly. The question is whether the West and the U.S. Can endure a few months of pain, because that will be required. The Iranians, in their seemingly irrational brazenness, are betting that the answer is no. I think they may have miscalculated.
Now, Mr. Dan Perry, could this arrangement help Iran improve its diplomatic position with the Gulf states and potentially reduce its isolation if Iran and Oman were to create this strait to allow certain vessels to be passing through?
I don't think so. I don't think anyone wants Oman and Iran, and the real issue is Iran, to be controlling passage and allowing some through and not allowing others through. There's no way that's going to be accepted. As I said before, if whatever they're cooking up now is essentially a backtracking away from their efforts to charge fees and tolls and to control passage and decide who goes through and who does not, then yeah, that could improve their position indeed. For the Iranians, who knows? Maybe the Americans will be willing to go back to the rather shameful memorandum of understanding. That was a memorandum of capitulation, but maybe not. I mean, what they've done these past several months, I think, has so angered the American administration that they may not be willing to go back to that capitulation. It's possible they'll conclude that the wisest course is simply to choke the life out of the regime economically until it should collapse.
Now, Dan Perry, is what you are saying is that Iran is at its end? Is that what you're saying? But according to what we have just heard, that the U.S., with the imposition of the new sanctions, economic sanctions on Iran, and China also not backing down and saying that it continues to trade with Iran under international law. Now, what are we going to be seeing now in the next few months with the new economic sanctions that are going to be implemented on Iran? Are we expecting to see Iran suffer more in this war, or or at least come into an agreement with the United States so that this war, this 6-month-long war, can altogether come to an end?
My suspicion is that we're entering a second phase of an economic war. And obviously the Americans would like that time frame to be accelerated via China ceasing to buy the Iranian oil that, as I say, has been removed from Iran itself and therefore is still available. But that's like a savings account that is depleted all the time when you don't have any income. You run out of it and then you go bankrupt. China, by not even buying that oil, could hasten the demise of the Iranian regime, which would, I'm sure China knows, be an enormous favor to the Iranian people. Will the U.S. really make good on threats to Chinese companies and maybe even the Chinese government over this? I cannot say, and I suspect maybe not, because that would even create more economic pain. It might accelerate the outcome, but it would make whatever period has to be endured by the global economy even worse if the result is a significant economic war between the U.S. and China. I do think, however, that if the Chinese identify that this is a lost cause because the U.S. and the West are determined and are willing to absorb the economic pain that it will require, it's possible that the Chinese, who are nothing if not practical and cynical and indifferent to alliances, might drop Iran like a hot potato, because at the end of the day, they stand to gain a lot more from access to Western markets that are huge than to Iranian goods whose value is small. They have alternative sources for the oil they buy from Iran, and they may decide to go that route, but not if they sense weakness, as the Iranians hitherto have sensed. So yeah, China is the third party to this that is very important, and much depends on what they do. But I think the bottom line is the same. Iran will run out of the oil that it can currently sell China outside the blockade zone. And if the blockade is maintained, their economy will collapse.
Mr. Dan Perry, thank you for your wonderful insights on that.